Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ask the CEO with Avrohom. Today, I'd like to introduce a very special guest. He's the founder of TmanSpeaks, a tech and media consulting practice focusing on cloud computing, cybersecurity, HR tech, social media, and emerging technologies. His aim is to help organizations keep their information protected, make better use of cloud computing, and more effectively use various technologies as well as social media. He's an advocate for Millennials and Generation Z, a big supporter of global goals for sustainable development. He is the host of the popular vlog, TmanSpeaks. It is my pleasure to welcome the T-Man himself, Tony Flath. Welcome, Tony.
Hey, Avrohom, how are you? It's great to be on. Thanks so much. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's really awesome having you. So I see that you've got a backdrop of New York City right behind you. That's the city.
I sure do. I'm going to be there next week for #Win with AI, an IBM analytics event about winning with artificial intelligence. Looking forward to it.
That's awesome, and looking forward to it as well. And hopefully we can hook up live when you're here in New York.
Yes, I'm hoping we can do that.
Awesome. So talking about technology, there's a term that you hear a lot when speaking about education called STEM. Now, as a supporter of young people, what is STEM and why is it important?
Right. So it's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And you'll also hear, from the UK, you'll hear it referred to as well. Well, here as well is STEAM, because they've now also integrated the arts into it, which they should. Certainly from that perspective, it's about blending those together and how does that work for individuals to have a full scope across that spectrum, and more importantly, how do you incorporate those skills with skills that we have day to day? How do you encourage that? It's certainly a push and a focus for getting more women in tech. Getting girls interested in technology, things like that, allowing them to go beyond, I can't do mathematics, I can't do engineering, and programs and ways of approaching that to really encourage that behavior.
And, it's interesting to that point. So one of the challenges we hear about all the time is that there aren't enough qualified candidates for high-tech jobs like cybersecurity. What's your opinion on what should be done to address this challenge?
It's a really big challenge, and it's something from cybersecurity alone. There's just not enough people that are going to be, filling the jobs, or the jobs of today and really the jobs of tomorrow. For yourself from working, in the communication space, and now you're more focused on the IoT side and the artificial intelligence. Just to keep up with those skills is a tremendous amount. But look at how well organized Russia is, and different countries are from a cybersecurity threat perspective, and the fact that they're funded, they're organized. When you go to the dark web and all the tools that are available as a service in order to get credentials and get ways into organizations, it's become much more targeted in organizations. And cybersecurity is really evolved, and it really needs to step up out of that, just a part of IT, to really being at the board level, but from at a larger level, but at a training level. Yeah, it's certainly something that needs to be addressed. It's certainly something that organizations can certainly look to IT resources they have that have some interest in that. And there's certainly some great courses out there. An influencer that I'm meeting in New York next week that I interact with quite a bit, Kevin Jackson. He does a whole list of training and certification around different cloud and cybersecurity offerings. I think that you look at ISAC, you look at some other organizations, ISC, you look at those different places, and there's certainly some ways to get trained there. But there is a big need in order to fill that gap. I've done blogging around that and interactions around that, and it's really just about being aware of it, and developing some skill set that can support it. And really, it's changing so fast that you have to continually stay on top of it. So even people that you think are trained, you know, you need to look at that. And another thing I think, and Rob May touches on this on his TED Talks, and he's also just put out, you know, an Amazon book, Human Firewall. I think a lot of where people need to be trained is all users. All users are perpetrators of cybersecurity. And the more awareness and training in that respect, the better secured you are.
And not just perpetrators, but vulnerability as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you know, I've read enough on this now, and I've seen myself from working with cybersecurity, you know, where there's been threats, when there's been breaches, when they're active right now, and it's a panic mode. You don't know what to do. It's like, you know, you have to have a readiness plan. You have to be more versed in it, and really the skill set is hard to build as an organization, and there is a lot of opportunity out there, you know, to offer managed services around that, or to seek out, you know, partnering with someone, just because there is so much scope, you know, and knowledge in order to be able to adequately be prepared for it, right?
And you bring up a really good point about what happens when there's a breach. If you think about it, there are fire drills. You know, the military has all sorts of drills in order to train their soldiers, right? But do we have cybersecurity fire drills? I don't think that exists, right?
That's a really great point. You know, it's true. And yeah, it's really good to put some plan and policy. Very few organizations even know where to start. I've met enough with executives, and, you know, they're not sure where to start. You know, where do we deal with this? So I think it's a matter of pulling together and, you know, being aware that you need to do that, and how do we, you know, best adequately train people. And I think a big part of that is just education on what the true nature is of how, you know, threats work, and how well organized it is. Like, you watch that TED Talks, it really does put perspective in it, how much information we give out. Like,
Yeah.
the fun Facebook thing, you know, you put your name in, you put all your details in. So it's awareness. You know, I know, and you know, when you have a customer that's in the middle of the breach, it is like their building's on fire.
It's very fast moving. You're panicked, right? You don't know what to do.
You don't know what to do, and you don't know how far it's spread, right? Like, you're thinking, where do I go? What do I do? And you know, so certainly having some kind of plan in play is going to do that. And I think what's interesting about that, and you probably have some great insight on this too, is it's not even a matter of if, and it's even starting to get the matter of not even a matter of when. Odds are, in some way, shape, or form, it's happening somewhere across your organization. Other things that have been found out through consultants that I've worked with, through investigations and forensics that have been done after the fact, is they're inside your organization for 100 days plus. So how much information have they been just tracking? Once they get in at the system admin level, you can't differentiate them between you or a sysadmin. So what exactly are they doing, tracking? You know, it's really unknown at that point. So yeah, big push to get better training and, you know, better support for that, for sure.
Now let's take this cybersecurity conversation to the next level, and let's talk a little bit about hacks and data breaches, because, you know, they're happening at an alarming rate.
Mm-hmm.
Just to quote some statistics, according to Statista, as of mid-2018, there were 668 data breaches exposing 22.4 million records of data. I mean, that's
massive.
Yeah, it's massive, right? How can we leverage emerging technologies such as AI, machine learning, and cloud in order to bolster our data security?
Well, I'm going to give you some interesting perspective there. So one thing that I've gotten, you know, through the experience in cybersecurity and knowing it better is, you know, certainly looking at, you know, traditionally we're about perimeter, right? Perimeter control, endpoint control. I put up a fence and the gate and I should be good, right?
I feel like we're in the military now.
Yeah, yeah, and it is very military-like. Like it is like putting that, you've got, we should be fine. We've got our, border protected, right? But the intel definitely is, they're getting through. There's points in your armor where they're penetrating quite easily, and certainly you want to review, you want to look at. Having next generation gear for hardware, for firewalls, for endpoint, that do more application visibility and not just port and protocol, so that you're getting beyond, things like that. So there's a number of different things, but other things that I've seen from going through assessments and, following industry standard formats, frameworks like NIST, is that it's about how all that information is flowing across the organization. You got a growth and scale of all these different devices, both cloud-based and IoT-based, out on the edge. So you've got all these competing factors and more logs and more log sources. And most breaches have even an indicator in a log, but people just aren't managing it and they don't know how to get at that information. So if you look at a SIM, and a SIM is like it's looking at events, it's looking at information event monitoring. So basically, it's like this is where you really get into the artificial intelligence land.
Could you just define that term, SIM?
Yeah, SIM is what it is it's your security information event monitoring tool. What it's doing is it's monitoring all logs that are going through the organization. So I'll give you an example, right? So when you look at across the organization, you've got firewalls, you've got servers, you've got desktops, you've got all kinds of devices, you've got IoT devices. All those devices create logs. So a server log, or a login log, or you've set up a new PC, or you've authenticated yourself from a remote access point, right? So all those devices, they have all these things happening across the network, and then you have firewalls that are put in with rules, and they'll do some different things for detecting any kind of signatures they see are off, things like that. So they're all looking, but they have log sources, or they have places where they have audit trails of what's going on in those records, and they're retained in a database or in a log somewhere. And the point of them is to look at them. But with all the scale and technology, there's no way that you can look at all those logs. So what happens is when you put a SIM in place, right, and you put that event monitoring tool in place, it looks at all those points and it sets up a collector. And what that collector does is all those records point to that collector. But what they do is, in the design of whatever collector that is, whatever that SIM product is, they'll have a big data lake of information that they source both from the industry. So there's different sites, public, that have information about hackers, that have information about potential threats, that have all that detail. They'll source that information, and then they'll also source their own information that they're gaining from all their clients in this big data lake. And where the artificial intelligence and in machine learning comes into play is they know from a hacking perspective that hacks happen with technology that's quite old, but's taken and augmented slightly. So if there was, Trojan, worms, whatever, you see all these various ones that have come across, they're usually rudimentally based on a previous one with some tweak and change to it. So it's hard to identify on the open market when these new variants come out, and that's where the issue is. So say, for example, you do have a firewall out and they're updating all their intel on let's say some of them are 24-hour basis. let's say even if it was 5 hours as an example, right? So in 5 hours, the hackers put in a new variant. They put it in a really pretty looking email that looks just like your company email. Your firewall doesn't pick it up. Your endpoint doesn't pick it up. You click on it, boom, you've infected it. You might not even know it, right? So how the SIM gets and takes some additional layers of security is it uses machine technology and artificial intelligence through data science and analytics, looking at that data lake of information, and it looks for abnormalities, slight difference of changes within those files with hash. It might be in the hash detail, it might be in something in the way even to the port and protocol, how it's changing, different things on that perspective, right? So it's got all these things happening and going along, but what it does is then it defines, well, we know that this previous, malware or anything else was like this, and this one here seems to have some similarities, flag it, right? So then when it flags it, you get these severities. So you get a severity between a 0 and a 4. A severity 0 is, you better act on this right now. Something is happening. Boom. So first what that can do is source out where those different things happen. Now from a machine learning perspective, every time it finds these different variables, it then takes that and it does machine learning. So it gets to more deep learning. And as it builds that up, it gives an arsenal of what to do if that happens again. Also update the public internet of where these different threats are. And it also gives an ability to go back to your SOC or NOC or wherever you have your central support for your whole network. It gives the ability for those technical support people to go ahead and get flagged. Oh, wait, I've got a severity 0. I better get right on it. But let's take it a step further. So if you take it a step further, and this is where things get interesting and excites me, right? So if you know there's a threat, you're at night. Your whole IT department, they don't want a phone call. They would rather sleep through the night and not be bothered with it. Well, take it another level and have automated control, machine-to-machine control of that device. And I'll explain that a little further. So from a perspective of an endpoint, let's say, for example, you're getting logs from your firewall, from your email server, from your infrastructure server, your app server, all these different points. You've got someone who's logged in at a remote location. Maybe they didn't do their VPN or something was off or anything else.
You mean your sysadmin doesn't live in Iran?
Yeah. There you go. I can't help that. But really, so what happens is now all of a sudden you've got some kind of activity where it is off, where all of a sudden this device boots up and it flags the severity and things are seeming off. Well, why not just automatically control that endpoint device and pull it off the network?
Makes sense. If this, then this.
Yeah, exactly. And not only take it off the network, but put it into your own cloud environment where your test lab environment where you can go ahead and do your own forensics on it, everything else, and identify what happened to it, get the intel from it right away that you have available, but more importantly, pull it off the network with a machine-to-machine control. That's where things are going from a cybersecurity, AI, and machine control perspective.
And you bring up a really good point. I mean, this was an excellent description as to why you cannot ignore technologies such as AI and machine learning for things like cybersecurity, because the bad guys, the threat actors, they've got access to all this technology. Like we've heard from some of our guests before, the threat actors, they're not some guys living in a cave in a back world,
They're the coffee shop, yeah.
These people, they are technologically advanced, and they have access to all the latest tools, probably even more than we have. So
it's true. I've read a few things on this, and it really is about down to a war of machines, right?
yeah,
That's what they really deem it as. And when you really see how, they're saying that there's more users on the dark web than on the regular web, and that there is more activity. It's a really great unknown. And I think that's what people, they just get comfortable with what they know. You log into your computer, you go to Internet Explorer, you go to Chrome, or you go to Firefox, and, oh, I'm all right, I'm logged in. And even at the system and IT level where you've got some pretty good knowledge, that's where there's this bigger divide between cybersecurity professional and IT professional, because even they're thinking, oh, no, this is all fine. This is how Microsoft designs, or this is how, I have it set up from how it uses it. But they don't realize how simple it is to get to the internet without a browser or a Tor browser, and how much you can see in a company's or someone's PC, or how you can go on the dark web and easily get a software as a service, pay a little bit. Maybe it's a Bitcoin transaction and no one's even seen it, but you can utilize a tool that gets admin keys and gets you into their environment. And once you're in a sysadmin environment, watch out. And there's going to be more to follow up on this. And this is really intriguing to me. Is so much today is the key and the lock are behind the same door, right? So you've got system administrators that are doing work on an environment, right, where they hold both the lock and key. It's going to fail at some point, no matter how secure it is, no matter what process you have. It can be flawed from people, from someone coming inside your organization, from someone getting their way in and then doing that. That's a little harder to control, right? And those are things that we know are happening in the market. So to me, what's really interesting, and where I'm doing some work and having some conversation around, is why not put the key outside, or so that that's in another domain. So now all of a sudden, yes, it's locked down here, but you don't have the key in the same place. And this is where I think things like blockchain, and you touched this when we were chatting earlier, things like blockchain and artificial intelligence are really going to help to enable that further control and further press down on all the cybercrime that's happening, and better identify where these things are triggering, so that people can be, more secure and safe in how they utilize all this emerging tech.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
It sure will.
So, Tony, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about digital transformation. Because everybody's doing some form of digital transformation or another. What do CIOs need to know in order to implement a successful digital transformation project?
Well, I think that the main thing I see with this is you certainly see enough buzzword around about digital transformation, right? Like, oh, you better digitally transform your organization. Well, before you start anything, define what it is that you want to do. What is it that you would like to accomplish? So, for example, if you have a current way of like, back to your example of fulfilling orders for your coffee machine, right? If you know that you've had some issues with your customers, or you've had some lag in sales, and you know that you haven't been getting those refresh orders, well, now you've got something to look at. So identify what you want to do. And then from there, really define, what it is you want to do with the technology. Now, like this whole thing of just immediately, well, I'll just rip and replace. No, it's not a reality. There's so much combined, both on-prem, off-prem, edge, like edge plus cloud, right? There's so many different variables. To think you're just going to rip and replace, not going to happen. Cloud migration happens where it makes sense. I think I read something along the lines that 60-some%, a high percentage of infrastructure is still on-premise at an organization. So yes, cloud adoption is growing in a rapid rate and will continue to grow. Where you see it really grow, and you'll see more growth, is the software as a service, and how does that work so I can get everything in one serviceable item, just like my early days of starting with HR outsourcing on the cloud, right? So I think you'll see more of that break out and unfold, but it's certainly interesting days, man.
Yeah, for sure. So cloud or prem?
Both. I think that you can't get around that. So even to carry that digital transformation, story further and put a little more, flesh on that, the cloud or on-prem, well, you can't get away from both today. Certainly, as a game plan going forward, do your ROI, look at what your total cost of ownership is, look at and plan where it makes sense to migrate old legacy, application or infrastructure. Do your cost of ownership on that. Make sure you have a good angle on that, and be open to better utilizing the cloud. But also look at how you can go ahead and better utilize your technology across the board, so that you're not halting yourself thinking, well, I'm not going to do any of this unless I have cloud. This isn't going to work. Well, no, that's not true. If if you really take it on a project by project basis and have a goal and have a way of doing it. Recently, I did a podcast with IBM, and it was related to the May announcement of Red Hat and IBM Cloud having a better relationship together. What does that mean? Well, it's really leveraging all this new technology, emerging technology around container control, around Kubernetes, where you can have, all your whole environment within, one container. What does that mean? How does that more effectively work? But what that's done is it's enabled this way to work together, both from, you don't have infrastructure over here and you don't have application over here. You've really merged this together so that you have a fully serviceable, control from end to end. And what that can enable you to do further then is more effectively use your digital tools and truly do digital transformation. So then you can look at, how do I leverage objectives on what technology I have today, as opposed to saying, oh, I can never do this, I don't have the technology. There are tools more readily available that can engage your current environment, can engage multi-cloud, can engage edge, can engage, IoT devices to better work together, utilizing those tools like, that announcement with Red Hat and IBM, or the other things that are being done in market. You were talking earlier about Microsoft and what they're doing, and you look at Google and what they're doing and how big of a focus and shift they've done on cloud and on AI. So, really, I think your game plan and your perspective from a CIO is, you got to work with both in a way that meets company objectives, and you got to really have an idea and a game plan. You can't just chase technology. You have to understand how to use technology.
That's a really great point. And, Tony, this was a really fascinating conversation. I certainly learned a whole lot, and which is kind of why we do this, Ask the CEO. This is how we educate people in the latest trends of technology. So really appreciate you coming on. How do people connect with you?
Well, you can connect with me on social media. You can go to TmanSpeaks.com. You can check me out, TmanSpeaks, across Twitter. You'll see me on YouTube. You'll see me on Instagram. And you'll see me on LinkedIn, Tony Flath there.
I'll put that into the show notes so people can just click on that and get right to it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah.
So, Tony, do you have any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I would say a few things, back to, just putting yourself out there, going for it, putting your message out there. Just don't hold back. You might have some fear and you might have some worry and you might have to worry about what other people think. In the end, it doesn't really matter. What matters is how you feel about actually going for it. And, you also have to kind of bear in mind that it's not I'm going to go for it and immediately these things are going to take off and I'm just going to flourish.
It's going to take years.
It's going to take years. And it's going to take repetitive falling down and getting back up, right? It's the whole Rocky Balboa speech, right? Like it's really not, it's not about how hard you can get hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and get back up off the mat, right? So you got to take some blows and take some learning lessons and know that in that keeping at it and going at it over and over, things will start sticking. Look at you, for example, with Ask the CEO and how much, great message you get out there and, how we connected through that and, how you've connected with so many great people. Well, all of that is based on you just going for it. And really, you don't, yes, there's many things out there that say you got to have a plan, you got to put it together, got to do this. Well, there's also just the thing of knowing you want to do something and going for it. And the plan will come together.
Tony, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Oh, you know what, Avrohom, this has been fantastic.